It's almost like a reflex. Every morning I'll wake up, grab the milk from the fridge, get the coffee beans, grind, fill the pot up with boiling water. You know the routine. Then I'll grab a banana, some berries, put them in a blender, blend them all up. Barely takes 5 minutes. Then when I get home from work, I'll get the rice on the pot. I'll take the veggies and the meat we have stocked up, cut them all up, throw them into the pot. Boom, dinner is ready in about an hour or two. And when things run out, I'll make a run to the grocery store and expect the coffee beans, the berries, the meat and the veggies, and whatever I have stocked up to be there every single time. But what if they're not there? What if they're not there for a long time? What if some of the staples I'm used to having stocked up doesn't fit the budget? Is that even a real threat? To countries like Lebanon, Zimbabwe, Venezuela, Sri Lanka, Argentina, and many more, it's food security or lack of it is not just an issue. It's a crisis, it is a threat, and it could be the beginning for the rest of the world.
Have you ever thought, like, where is this food coming from, and who are the people involved in it, and what are they enduring to produce this food, and whether they're getting the right pay or not? We don't think about that. Food security has basically different components. Traditionally, it means that all people have economic access to healthy and nutritional food in a consistent manner to maintain a good lifestyle or a decent life.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Quake City Portal. Souhad Abou Zaki is a curious economist and a rural development enthusiast. She is currently a senior admissions officer residing in Lebanon at Notre Dame University, Louaize. Souhad works as a lecturer in economics, teaching undergrad courses in microeconomics, managerial economics, and international economics. She is also a research consultant and proposal writer for rural entrepreneurs, helping conduct research on rural development-related topics which include women's economic empowerment, food security, and social entrepreneurship. She holds a degree in economics from the American University of Beirut and a master's in agricultural economics and development. She is currently pursuing another degree in food security. This episode is loaded with information about the basics of food security. The intention is to help raise awareness about how to create food security in our own households, the factors of rising food costs, and what can happen and is currently happening to many countries around the world. Food prices are rising because of what is called the perfect storm: soaring fertilizer prices, effects of climate change on soil, the impact of the conflict between Ukraine and Russia, the aging agriculture labor force, and then some. This is not a political episode. It's an episode about the emerging threat to one of our basic needs: food. It's about the land and the systems we depend on to keep our grocery shelves stocked, our refrigerators full, and it's about the people we rely on to help grow our food. Souhad is one of the people in her native country of Lebanon, helping to raise awareness of this ongoing food crisis. It was a privilege to pick her brain and learn, as I hope you will, about this interconnected web of municipal, rural, local, and global body of people that help keep us all happy and fed. So I hope you've got a long, relaxing walk, hike, or run ahead of you, or maybe a cup of delicious brew in hand as you plug in, listen in on this conversation. All right. So, since we only have cousins, as I've mentioned, and family, married into my wife's family, actually, from Lebanon. I've never actually, other than my uncle, his name's Uncle Tony, I've never met anybody from Lebanon, actually. I mean, I've rarely ever spoken to him about Lebanon. He mentions a lot about Abu Dhabi because he went there. No, he I think that's the first place he went to before the United States during the Civil War, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken. So it's not my story to tell, but yeah. So I just want to
So
get to know.
basically, you did visit Lebanon.
I've never visited Lebanon.
Oh.
Our cousin visited Lebanon recently in the past. I don't know. I'd say less than 5 years. They visited
Mm.
Lebanon. So, and then even then, I really never. I feel like I should have asked a little bit more about it, but in the days leading up to this conversation, I've read a lot about Lebanon, a lot about the food situation there. But I guess before we go there, I'd like to find out a little bit more about what life was like. I mean, for you, you don't have to go into too deep of any detail if you like, but what life is like for you in Lebanon and currently, and in the past and currently.
So basically, in before 2019, life was actually good in Lebanon. Like I don't know much about the civil war. I was born after it, or like at the last year of it. So I don't know much. I don't have memories of the war
Mhm.
or anything. The 1990s were somehow peaceful to a certain extent. There were years where we had like some stability. Economy was okay. I'm not gonna say was growing fast or anything, but it was okay. It was growing at a certain pace, and we were having a good life. Like people wanted to get rid of the civil war memories. Like they want to live a good life because they endured a lot during the war and so on. But it wasn't easy, living in such an environment, like too many bad memories. And I had like part of my life where I lived in UAE and returned. I didn't know much about the politics in Lebanon, and I didn't care that much until 2005, where we started having like political assassination, like regularly. Suddenly,
Mhm.
like people, after the assassination of the prime minister Rafiq
Mhm.
Hariri, like suddenly everyone was interested in politics. People started talking
Right.
about sects and religion and political division, and everyone started to have an opinion. And this was not easy to adapt to. However, the economic situation continued to be okay until the 2019, where we had like the outbreak of the economic crisis. Honestly, I have really good memories in the country. I studied here, though I lived in another country, like I lived in Dubai, and it
Mm.
was very convenient in all dimensions, but I didn't like it. I always felt like I wanted to return, and when I returned to Lebanon, I was so happy to return. I continued my education and I started working, and everything was fine for me. And I was like able to adapt, and I was happy, I think. And
Yeah.
most of the people were okay. Like we didn't feel like we're suffering or anything until we had the crisis at the end of the 2019, and then the economic crisis plus COVID plus plus the Beirut explosion. The Beirut explosion was literally the cherry on top. Everything was destroyed after that. Like everything was became so complicated after that. Like even now they try to have like to relaunch the economy in a way, but it's hard. It's becoming too complicated with all the political issues and the economic issues, the food situation.
Hmm. Hmm.
But the country is
So
beautiful.
yeah, yeah, I've heard. I mean, love the food. I have a background myself as a chef, and our cousin who comes to family parties makes the best hummus that I've ever tasted.
Yeah, we're
and
known for
and
our good food, actually.
right, it's beautiful, and I'm sure the culture is beautiful. It's very diverse from what I've read, religiously, and beyond that, I really don't know too much about it. I regret to say, but that's why we're here, and that's why I'm very thankful that you're taking the time to speak with me and whoever might be listening to this conversation. As far as 2005 goes, that's 2005 that you said people started becoming more conscious about the local
Politics.
government and the government of Lebanon itself. Okay.
And the religious divisions, we had a civil war like for 10 years. People were trying to get over it and forget it. After the assassination, like everyone started to remember those divisions, started to talk about religious divisions and political issues. People were really started to really like feel the intensity of the division. And before that, we were okay. We were like fine, just living,
Right. Your studies as entrepreneur, or not entrepreneur, in economics and then agricultural economics. Does your family have a background in the agricultural field? Is your family history of academics? Is there, because
No.
you're a lecturer as well, so okay.
My mom was a school teacher, actually.
Okay.
And my dad works like had a marketing company, so he has nothing to do with academics.
Okay.
And basically, why? So you're asking why, like agriculture economics specifically, or?
Yeah, I think, especially with your focus on Lebanon, it's such a big. I guess the task is very huge. What I'm seeing that you're taking on. So I guess I want to know what, your intrinsic purpose is with taking on something like that in your country.
Let me start from the beginning. Like originally,
Sure.
I was trained as an economist. So like my BA is in economics. Honestly, I didn't choose to study in economics. I was studying computer science, and then I decided to shift to economics because I felt like I have an interest in people. Like I wanted a major that is related in a way to people. I found computer science a little bit boring. So I decided to go into economics. And I loved it, actually. But I always had this feeling that even if I want to study, like to have a master's degree, I wanted something related to people. I had this in the back of my mind. And I grew up in a rural area. So like I used to see people working in farming and in agriculture. And during the summer, we plant as well our food. So I always had this interest in people and in like food systems and so on. So when I started with economics, I knew I wanted to continue studying, but I didn't want to go to financial economics. Like usually economists usually go either like pure economics or financial economics or something related to development. So since I was more into people and rural areas and food systems, I found that agriculture economics was the best fit for my interest. And honestly, when I chose this field, like people were questioning my choice, like it was not the trend. And I was like, why agriculture economics? Like, the agriculture sector is dying, so why are you bothering studying about it? And people were doubting my choice, and I doubted my choice too at some point. And funny enough, like I've been studying like in 2000. I started my master's in 2010. At that time, I started to have interest in food security, though at that time it was not a big issue,
Right.
So my research, my thesis was about food security. I was trying to understand what happened in the food crisis in 2007. So I always had this interest, and it's like, it's a field where I can contribute to my community, work on improving the life of people in rural areas. So
Right.
I wanted to make an impact and study something that I am interested in, though I know I was aware that it might be too narrow for a country like Lebanon. Surprisingly, in the past in the past like four years, this is the biggest issue in Lebanon, like food security, and there are very few people in the country who understand this topic.
Mm-hmm.
There are many people who talk about it,
Mm-hmm.
but few people who
Mm-hmm.
understand it and research about it. And there is a need for it now. And luckily, with the organization with rural entrepreneurs, is where basically I started working on like projects and designing projects related to livelihoods and food security in rural area. Like I started in like 2016. So I
Right.
developed a good experience in the field, and then I decided to formalize it with the degree. So I think it was a natural evolution of my interest.
Yeah.
And I love the field. There is it's a very big field. Unlike people think, it's a very big field, and there are so many things to study and so many things to research. And you can actually see, yani, there is an applied part in it, so it's not like theoretical. Like I wouldn't choose to go for like pure economics and just study theories and numbers without going to the field and see how these theories like impact people and change their life. So it has an applied component which I really like.
Wow. So that's amazing that you see there's actual you there's sometimes people study these fields and they disconnect themselves from what's actually happening at ground level. And the fact that
Yes.
you're actually putting yourself there first and seeing the value in that skin in the game right there, where you're
Yes.
actually actually experiencing the things that you have maybe intellectual impact on. Um,
Sure. And it's not just experiencing the thing, like bearing part of the consequences, or like, being affected by whatever you preach or you
right.
recommend. Yes, I believe this is very important. And I actually like worked in academic research for 3 years before I moved into the field. Back then, I was a fresh graduate, and I thought like this is the most sophisticated thing that you can ever do as an economist. So I was like working with data in the office and analyzing data and so on, and coming up with recommendation and theory until I went to the ground, and I figured out
Right.
like most of what we say doesn't apply. So I started to reconnect to the things on field, because I think this is how economists should work.
Yeah. 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 And I'd like to share, some what brought me here to you was my interest initially in food and my background in the restaurant industry. I used to work in kitchens for 15 years and then started my own business, and with the help of my family, and we operated a catering company out of farmers markets and things like that. And I saw throughout the years how much waste just goes directly into, I mean, perfectly good food, from supermarkets to, the small corner stores, the back of every restaurant that I worked at, just tons and tons of food. And then the pandemic happened, and then I started researching how much food waste per household goes in just the United States alone, and then you see the world, and it's appalling how much food is wasted every year and
Sure.
goes nowhere to just landfill that can't even keep up with. And then that's where I started even questioning, you know, our food systems here in the United States. It was hard to even get the most secure country in the world, supposedly, right? Supposedly, people can't even. I experienced firsthand not even being able to go to the grocery store because of just shortages, and I was like, wow, what a very thin thread this society, world system, uh, what a very thin thread we're all holding on to. It seems like it's very strong, but it's really not. I mean, do you share that sentiment as well?
Yes, like big
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Like in the past decades, when we started to have like more globalization and countries like markets became more interconnected. Now this interconnection
Hmm.
works perfectly well in good times. In bad times, when you have like external shocks, whether it's COVID or a pandemic or whether it's a war or anything else, this interconnectedness makes the food system, more vulnerable to shocks and more vulnerable to crisis. So it works perfectly in good time. It doesn't work. It doesn't work in bad times, and the pandemic was the best example, and the war now in like Ukraine and in Ukraine now is another good example, because like
Yeah.
everyone is affected by it, because our food systems are very interconnected, that anything that happens in one place, it will have certain repercussions in other places, because we are interdependent. And this is sometimes it might have like severe impact on certain populations, or in certain countries, like especially developing countries, where like the poor or the most vulnerable people reside. So they are the most affected. In terms of food waste, yes, that's this is a big issue. Like around 33% of the global food production is wasted, and some part of it is like, we have something called food loss and we have something called food waste. So we distinguish between the two. There are many different definition for like food loss and food waste, but basically the very basic definition is basically food loss is wherever you lose in terms of quantity and quality at the post-harvest level, yani after production, and before reaching the consumer, so, or the retailers. And food waste is whatever you lose after that. So food
Hmm.
waste, whatever you waste after that. So some people, like, we have a quantity of like crops or food that is thrown simply because they don't look good.
Right. Yeah.
Like, so if you have like I don't know, like a banana that doesn't look right, so it's thrown
Hmm.
away.
Right.
Or a tomato that looks weird. It's a tomato at the end of the day, but it's thrown because like some people might not be willing to consume it because it doesn't look like the conventional, for example, tomato. So we have like a part, like around 13.8% or so, that is thrown before reaching the retail level or the consumer level. And then we have what we waste because of overconsumption or bad
Right.
storage or bad use. So it's sad. And on the other hand, we have like around 800 million people who are hungry. It's ironic.
Yeah. Wow. I would love to get your thoughts on the solutions to that at later on in this conversation. But I also wanted to touch upon you mentioned that you design interventions and program and conduct the research needed. Um, in what areas are you doing this? Is it just with the company that you work for, right? Is it all across Lebanon?
Yes, mainly my work is mainly focused on Lebanon. I do sometimes like some research work for other countries in the MENA region. However, like most of my work is on Lebanon, and I do it like independently. I have my own work, like I design like projects on my own, and I have like programs I do for the organization I work with.
Can you just talk a little bit about what exactly goes into the work of designing and programming and then implementing those things
Yes.
that you're working on?
This falls under the development work. So I work in rural development. If I want to think of a general title of what I do, it's rural development. So basically, in rural areas, like we have like people tend to face challenges that people in the urban areas don't face. And there is no much diversification in terms of income sources and the economic activities due to many reasons. So this is why we tend to work with like international organizations or local organizations to develop interventions in different areas. It could be livelihoods, it could be food security, it could be women empowerment, for example, or it could be designed for specific sectors like agriculture, agri-food, or let's say a certain or other production. So what we do basically is, let's say an international organization has raised funds to support certain vulnerable groups in area. What we do is basically we study or we assess the needs of these groups, and we try to design interventions in a way to help them, let's say, improve their condition, reach or improve their access to like productive resources, depending on the sector we're working on. So this is in general what we do. I can give so many examples. For example, in the last couple of years, because everyone was so concerned about food security and the agriculture sector, there was a lot of funding coming for the agri-food systems in Lebanon, or the agriculture sector. So we were like designing programs to support farmers or to support, let's say, small businesses that were not able to adjust properly to the crisis. There are different ways to support them. Like it could be technical, like teaching them how to grow food in a more sustainable way, for example, or more efficient way. It could be technical intervention. It could be more a business intervention, for example, how to redesign their business in a way that is more sustainable and they can like survive the crisis and still make profits or sustain their activities. There could be other intervention like providing in-kind support or financial support to do specific things. So there are many ways to support. It depends. It really depends on each group, the profile of the group, the goal of the intervention, the needs of the groups, etc.
And I'm just curious about this type of intervention too. I have a relative from the Philippines that is trying to develop a rural area in the south. He also has an agricultural background in farm systems and is trying to implement a tech-driven agricultural industry. But he has mentioned intervention from people outside of the Philippines. I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on, like, let's say if this happened in Lebanon, for example, he has been aided by somebody from, or he calls a Dutch guy that he met that is willing to invest in his work as a farmer or somebody that has the know-how. Yeah, what do you think about the outside influences as far as people from outside of the country?
Well, I think like in Lebanon and other developing countries, like many organizations, like international organizations, used to perceive these countries as areas of experimentation, to be honest. In the past years, we have received a lot of funds. We have seen like different kinds of interventions and projects, some of which work, some of which didn't work, because you can have an excellent model that works perfectly well in another country and it might not work in your country. There, like each location has its own specifications and its own, each country is is different. I know that there are certain experiences that you might in a way generalize, but that doesn't mean and it will work every time. So you need to consider the context you're operating in. And this is why many programs did not succeed or did not do any impact. And I'm talking about millions and even more, millions of dollars spent on projects that did not lead anywhere.
Right.
Now, I'm against imposing things like, even if it's an international organization and it has like experience in the field, that doesn't mean it knows what it's best for the people in the country. I'm against this sort of relationship. Like, we know what's best for you. No, you don't know what's best for us. We know what's best for us, for example, but we might need like support, and it's fine. So I personally refuse to work on project that is not sensitive to the target population. Like, if you think it's right, again, you need to check if the people are willing to receive such support, if they are willing to be part of it, if this is what they need. Like, I'm not willing to spend energy and effort on projects or interventions that might not lead anywhere, or that might force people to do things that they don't want to do just to receive like certain support or so. It's a very delicate matter, by the way, and we sometimes experience certain friction, especially with international organization. But I know that they started to understand that we need a local component in every project. Like, you cannot come and throw your consultants in the field and just let them spend like 1 day or two on the field and then ask them to design a project. It doesn't work this way. So they started to like include local partners, local communities in the design of the project or the intervention, to somehow create an ownership. And in order not to invade the privacy of these groups or community, or to gain some certain acceptance or reduce resistance, let's say, and this is important. I'm not saying that it happens every time,
Right.
but it is happening anyway.
What kind of successes have you seen with the projects that you've put into place, given the situation?
Well, I've seen like we had interventions, different intervention in different sectors. I recall many stories of people starting their own businesses and succeeding in creating jobs and earning money because of these businesses. In rural areas, as I said before, the economic activities are very limited. Like, people or the economic activity tend to be focused on very few sectors. So you can choose to improve these sectors, or you can choose to diversify. It's really up to your philosophy whether you want to invest in one sector that is already known or common, or to diversify. In all cases, if you succeed in creating awareness about certain economic opportunities, to raise interest in these economic activities, then this is a success. And personally, at the personal level, what I think worked well, other than seeing people creating their own businesses, is seeing people collaborating with each other. Nice. Because in rural areas, social networks are key for any success. Like, you will not have enough resources to do everything on your own. Right. You will need to partner with others. So whenever I see this happening in one project or in a project, I think that we reach our goal. Like, the partnership will help these people sustain themselves. They will help these people grow, even when the project ends. And the intervention is at most 2 years, for example. This is the longest intervention possible, perhaps like 2 years or 4 years, whatever. It will end at some point. So you need to create people who are able to sustain, or networks who are able to sustain these people even when the project ends. So when this happens, then perfect, we succeeded.
That's amazing. And going back to food security, and apologies if I'm jumping all over the over the place.
It's fine.
You're just saying a lot of interesting things that I'm just kind of calling back to. So yeah, we mentioned about the fragility of the systems in place, and how it shocked the food system, the pandemic, and in some effects, I mean, in many aspects, we're feeling the effects and probably haven't seen the worst of it yet, right?
Yeah.
And now there's more and more rumblings of apocalyptic levels of countries like Sri Lanka. I've seen Pakistan mentioned, countries in Africa, the Middle East. What do you see is the worst what do you see the worst case scenario? How do you see it playing
in terms
out?
of food security?
Yes.
Okay. Now, what's happening now, is kind of new to everyone, because we have all the factors that affect food security coming together. In the food crisis in 2007, 2008, for example, it was mainly driven by higher demand in emerging markets, or the increasing demand for biofuel, and speculations, and some climate extreme weather condition in certain exporting countries. So we have these factors leading to an increase in the food prices and creating food crisis. What we're seeing now is bigger. We have economic downturn. We have a climate change. We have extreme weather in many countries at the same time, many big exporting countries. We have a war. We have all the factors that contribute to food insecurity coming together, and it's usually, it's the first time you have this combination, and it's clear from the food prices that we're reaching a level that was not reached before.
Wow.
So it is worrying. Stock to use, how the grain stock, for example, is lower than it used to be. And this is also worrying. The war in Ukraine is causing so many repercussions, in different countries. Mm-hmm. Some countries are so worried that they are imposing export bans, and this will lead to further shortages or bigger shortages and further increase in prices. And the problem is that we don't know how and when it's going to end. We don't have clear idea what's going to happen. The crisis is really worrying. I don't think it's going to end anytime soon. And we have the weather. The climate change is playing a huge role. I think this is also something that we were not that aware of in the past decades. We used to have food crisis and so, but we were not that aware of the impact of the climate change.
Right.
And this is affecting the production in many countries, the production levels, the ability of to sustain certain supply of the supply of crops. And I really don't know. Every time I research related topics, I feel down because things don't look good, and we don't have any idea when it's gonna improve.
Right.
So and you have to keep in mind that now we're experiencing all these problems that directly after the pandemic.
Right.
So the pandemic, or during the pandemic, the global food system was already drained. It was exhausted. So the pandemic is almost over, and then we got the new shocks. So it was already vulnerable and it was already suffering and struggling. And then we have the war, and then we have the extreme weather conditions in certain countries. So everything that could possibly go wrong is going wrong. So
Wow.
it's important. Like, one thing that is important to do is to keep the supply chains, to keep the flow of products, not to try as much as possible not to disrupt the supply chains. But I don't know, because there is like political instability and wars. So I don't know how much we can control that,
And you mentioned the interconnectedness of all the globalization. You mentioned globalization as one of the contributing factors to this situation that we're in. And then also, I mean, it's kind of like the perfect storm of war and leadership, climate change and things like that. So now that we've established that as one of the problems, you also mentioned that what we're talking about can be viewed at a country level and at an individual level to a point where they somehow interact with each other, right?
Yes, of course.
Can you expand on that, and also what we might be able to do individually to, I guess, not be so I guess I'm struggling to find a question here, but what
To
people can
mitigate
do
the impact.
Yes, I guess we could start there.
Okay, I think we should start by defining food security, just to understand why it can have different levels and why it is not just a concern for countries or governments, it's also a concern for households. So, we take our food for granted. Have you ever thought, where is this food coming from, and who are the people involved in it, and what are they enduring to produce this food, and whether they're getting the right pay or not? We don't think about that,
Right.
And I think it's time. To rethink the whole matter. First, I like to start by the definition of food security, just to understand what is food security, because food security is a concept, is a broad concept that evolved over time. People tend to confuse it for agricultural production. So whenever we mention food security, people talk about how much is being produced, and we need to increase the agricultural output and the productivity to feed the growing population. It's not just about production. So food security is basically has basically different components. Okay, so traditionally, it means that all people has economic access to healthy and nutritional food in a consistent manner to maintain a good lifestyle or a decent life, a healthy and beneficial life. So now this means that food security basically stands on four main components. Lately, they added 2 other components, but the 4 main components are basically what we call food availability. It's basically what we have food available in the country, whether from local production or imports or reserves. So first, you need the food to be available. And this is where basically production and productivity comes in. Then, and this is basically the main, the original thoughts about food security. After the World War II, food security was thought from a production lens. Basically, if we increase productivity, agricultural productivity, poor people will have more food to eat, and this will improve their life, and so on. And obviously, it didn't work because, we had famines and hunger in different areas of different countries, even though food was or the production was good enough to feed everyone, we had people starving in different areas. So it was clearly not a pure production matter. So here comes the second component of food security, which is food access. So let's say if food is available, are you able to access it? Do you have are there economic or physical obstacles which are preventing you from accessing the people and the food? And this is where we talk about food prices, purchasing power, incomes, poverty, etc. This is more the economic side of it. Okay. Mm-hmm. And we have the third component, which is utilization. So if food is available and I'm able to access it, am I using it in a way that is in the right way? Is it contaminated? Am I using it in the right quantity? So is it affecting my nutritional status, my health status? Is it stored properly so that it doesn't affect my health and so on? This is where the nutritional side of the food security comes in. And then you have the stability, and you need these components, or these three components, whether availability, access, and utilization, are consistent. Yani you're not food secure if you have food like one day and you're starving the other day. So it doesn't make sense. So you need stability in these components. Now lately or recently, we had two other components added, but it's still not used a lot. We have agency, people having a say over the food they choose to consume and the resources that help them reach the food. And we have sustainability. We started talking about sustainability, and are we producing our food in a sustainable way that does not lead to, let's say, soil degradation or overuse of water. So this might impact the later generation or the ability of later generations to access food and so on. So this is food security. So I can look at it from a macro level. And it's a concern. Of course, the government is concerned to at least make sure that there's enough food available in the country, that people are able to access it, and that it's safe enough that it doesn't hurt people's health. Because if you think of it, someone who is sick, a person who is sick will not be able to work, will not be able to maintain proper economic and social activities. So it starts with food, but it somehow leads to other problems, let's say in productivity, in education, in ability to be engaged in the social life and the economic life and so on. So it's a problem. So you can think of it from a country level, because you as a person, you are not responsible of the, let's say, grain stock in the country.
Right.
This is a government issue. You cannot impact, let's say, the volume that is imported or exported directly. So these are government issues. And you're not responsible of every other people or all the other people who are suffering from hunger. So these are government matters. But as individual, you are affected by food security, whether you like it or not. So if the food is not available, then you're likely to experience shortages, and you're likely to suffer. If, for example, let's say I give you the examples in Lebanon, we have hyperinflation. We have 3-digit inflation. So the cost of the food basket increased incredibly. So some people are now unable to purchase their food. They're skipping meals. They're sacrificing on other areas of the budget. Let's say they're removing their children from schools in order to be able to survive. They're giving up on their, let's say, medical treatments and so on. They're reducing their quantities they consume to be able to survive. So whether we like it or not, we are going to be affected. Now, it's not logical to say that, or to recommend, this is what happened at the beginning of the crisis in Lebanon. Everyone was calling people to go back to agriculture.
Right.
This is not the solution. This is possible. This is good, but this is not the solution. However, having access to land and to farming activities might reduce your vulnerability. And this is something I studied like in the when I was researching the past the past food crisis. We tried to study the impact of the increase in price on people and the nutritional intake of people, and we figured out that people living in areas where they have like access to land or to farming activities, they were less prone to experience, let's say, deficiencies and malnutrition than urban people. So in a way, yes, growing your own food might help, but this is not the only solution, of course.
Right.
Like, it's kind of funny. I keep laughing at it because like I remember like people telling others like you should grow food on your balcony, and it became a joke in Lebanon. So like grow food, and it's like it's the solution for the economic crisis. So having to this is one way. If you have access to land, then yes, this is good. If you have if you are in an area where you can partner with others to somehow localize the supply chain, this would help improve stability. So you might not have the land, but you might have other economic resources. So you might really be willing to partner with your neighbor, for example, or someone in your community, or to have like community gardens or community farms in order to grow food, for example. So you can contribute to the network in different ways. Now, you can always substitute like food categories, but this has to be done with caution, because when people substitute like one good for the other, sometimes they substitute within the same category, sometimes they substitute across categories. And in most of the time, especially when we're talking about poor people, they do it without knowledge of the nutritional implication of such substitution. I give you an example. So, for example, if the meat is so expensive, they might choose either to drop the whole category, the meat, or to substitute it, let's say, with lentils, for example, or with something else, with potato. I don't know. Okay, so this might impact their nutritional status. So most of the time, people do it without being aware of these implications. So one way, if you're not like, I understand that some people cannot do that, like they don't have access to information, or they don't have enough education, or they don't have enough resources to get this knowledge, especially if we're talking about extremely vulnerable population. So I understand they cannot do that, but if you have the luxury, then you should be doing these substitutions with knowledge about their complications or their implications on your health. So when it comes to the individual activities, this is what you can do, basically. Try to improve your access. Try to not to substitute food in a random way without understanding the implication. If you have access to land, yes, growing your own food might help. If you don't, then partnering with others to do that will help you. Having different sources of different supply sources will also help you stabilize your food. Basically, that's it.
Yeah. I love what you mentioned.
Reduce waste.
Waste, definitely.
Definitely.
Yeah. Don't let those leftovers in the fridge go to the trash can.
This is something we face in Lebanon. I think it's something we experience in other countries as well. We talk a lot about hospitality in Lebanon and how people are welcoming, and whenever you come, they have the food. They serve like a lot of food and large quantities, and most of the time we end up throwing a big portion because we cannot consume that quantity. So I hope that the crisis taught people to reduce the waste. I'm hoping so. There is a study that is published recently, but I didn't get the chance to read. It's basically about the impact of the crisis on food waste in Lebanon, but I didn't get the chance to read it. So to see if actually the amount decreased or not.
Are there local services that are willing to take food waste and deliver it to people in need? Like a food
Very
bank or
limited.
something like that?
There are
Yeah.
food banks, and there are local NGOs that provide meals and food parcels to people, but initiatives to redistribute, let's say, the leftovers or the waste are very limited.
I also like what you mentioned too about having access to land for people to grow their own food. One big problem here that's emerged because of the pandemic is that there's just a lot of empty parking lots now and empty businesses. I mean, what is one less parking lot or empty, strip mall to replace with actual land that, can build a community and have people. I really like that solution that you proposed. Is there anything like that in Lebanon currently where, you know, community farms are sprouting up,
Yes.
things like that? Yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah.
First, after the crisis, we saw a lot of people returning to their rural to their villages, basically to rural areas, and many people started farming or started taking care of the land. The scale is still relatively small. We're not talking about a huge project, but it's there. And we've seen like some cooperatives working, agricultural cooperatives working with farmers. Before that, there were land was basically, or agriculture basically was not a priority for people. It was not seen as something important. We
Right.
had the luxury because of our overvalued currency. Somehow it was easier to buy food or to import food than growing food, and it is the
I
consequence of
see.
having a fixed exchange rate and an overvalued currency. So before
Mm,
that, it was not a priority. When the currency started to depreciate and to lose its value, people this affected basically the income of the people. So the real income were basically eroded, and they had to figure out other ways, either to generate income or to get food. So many people
wow.
returned to their villages and started taking care of their lands. There is a lot of fund from international organization coming in the past, like 4 or 5 years, especially the past 3 years, to the agriculture and the agri-food sector, not just
Right.
the growing, also the food processing. And we've seen initiative to help food processors and agriculture cooperative to export their food, like to improve the products and export their food. We've seen agriculture cooperatives establish or like going back to work out of necessity. So
Hmm.
yes, and
Hmm.
somehow it's getting more attention. The economy, the economic model that we used to follow did not really help.
Hmm.
We were like relying on the banking sector, we were relying on tourism, we were relying on services sector, some of which are extremely vulnerable to instability. And like at the first crisis, everything went down, like including the banking sector. So we did
Mm.
not pay attention over the years. We did not pay attention to the productive sectors such as agriculture or food production or other productions, manufacturing sector. So now we're trying. However, the crisis is not really helping much. Like we're seeing interest growing in these sectors, and this is definitely good. We're seeing like funding coming from outside to support enterprises in these sectors and to support farmers, which is good. But in parallel, we have a lot of instability.
So in essence, you're kind of saying that, like you mentioned earlier, that when things are going well, the system works great. But when things are going bad, it doesn't favor us very much.
Yes.
So in essence, what you're saying is money and finances, when things are going well, often make our leaders that we turn to, the academics, the government leaders. It's short-sighted. It's such a short-sighted view when things are going well. So it's almost like our leaders and the people that we depend on are so maybe a little too optimistic. Would you say?
I'm not sure
not
if
seeing,
they're being optimistic. Like if if I'm going to talk about Lebanon, I don't think they were optimistic. They were incompetent, and they literally didn't care about the people. We're talking about corrupted governments. We're talking about incompetent governments. We're talking about cronies, and those who are in power are basically those who own the companies and you know. So it's incompetence and corruption at the first place. Maybe in other countries, I don't know the case in other countries. In MENA in general, let's say in other countries, let's say Egypt, they also struggle with somehow similar challenges. Let's say in Egypt, in Tunisia, they somehow have similar challenges. In European countries, I don't know, honestly. But, what I realized is that politics come first.
Right.
It's like even when you have the technical solution for a problem, if you don't have the political will to solve this problem, then nothing will be solved.
Yeah.
And this is what's happening in Lebanon. It's not like we don't have a solution. It's not like our problems are so unique that nobody is able to come up with a solution. We do have solution. We do have technical expertise to solve these problems. We don't have political will to solve these problems. So this is why we're not able to get out of the crisis. We're not able to do anything. Like it's almost 3 years since the outbreak of the crisis, and nothing has been done.
I guess based on what I've read, the people that are involved in the agricultural sector are getting older. They're 60 years old and above, or that's the average age. How do you encourage and advocate more participation in, I guess, rural entrepreneurship, right? That we're talking about. How do we get more people, younger people, to invest in this type of lifestyle? And why do you think the youth are so diverted away from, I guess based also on what I've read, the population in rural areas are also shrinking, and by 2050 almost 2/3 of the population in the world will be living in cities. So what's being done, you think, to encourage, I guess, more growth in the agricultural sectors? There's been a steady decline I've seen in Lebanon, for example, although not dramatic, but just very steady decrease in participation in that field.
True. Well, first, specifically in developing countries, if you continue to picture the farmer as the most food insecure person, and the poorest person, and you keep posting those pictures about farmers who are struggling and who are poor, so you should not expect young people to be interested. So the way we picture farming is an issue. Now, if you ask this question to someone in Lebanon, the first answer would be technology. If you invest in technology in the agricultural sector, this will encourage young people to join the sector. Now, this is true, but this is part of the story. Why we have to understand why the young people are not interested in the agriculture at first. Let's say you spend 20 years, this is what happened in Lebanon, you spend 20 years praising specific sectors, the real estate sector, the banking sector. Right. You started portraying these sectors as the most profitable sector, the most prestigious sector for 20 years. What do you expect people to do? To go for agriculture? This is one. Second, if you have no policies to encourage people or to support farmers, no one will be encouraged to invest in farming. Farmers have no access to insurance services. Farmers are, it's mostly the work in the agriculture sector in Lebanon is mostly informal. People have no medical insurance, no access, like farmers have no access to medical insurance. They're not registered. There is no pension system. There is nothing, basically. So there is nothing attractive about the sector. So you ignored the sector for 20 years. You did not support the farmers. You did not try to create interest for 20 years. So people will not be interested. They will go, especially young people. Young people tend to be impatient. Like they want to grow fast. They want to make money fast. And this does not happen in agriculture.
Right.
Let's face it. Agriculture includes a lot of risk. It's not usually the most profitable business. Like if you have a business in another sector, it's most likely to be more profitable. But it does not mean that the agriculture sector or an agribusiness cannot be profitable. It can be profitable, but there are so many risks involved, and it's riskier than other sectors. And I can give you a very silly example. You can grow crops and after a flood, you can lose everything you grew. So if the country or if the government does not provide insurance for the farmer, then this will discourage the farmer from sustaining his or her activities. So the government didn't do anything. Now, technology, yes, investing in technology is definitely something interesting for the young people. However, it's not going to be enough. Like you need to think about like deeper problems. Young people have no access to finance. So if they have no access to finance, how are they supposed to invest in technologies? And this is why we're seeing in the past years like incubators and acceleration programs and companies trying to create interest by providing funds, because we know that finance is an issue. Access to finance is an issue, especially with the banking sector now. The banking sector here in Lebanon is dead. It's literally every bank acts as an ATM, as a big ATM. It does not provide loans anymore. It does not provide any other service. So it's not able to lend the productive sector. So we need to find other credit sources of credit and financing. So this is one issue. Another issue is basically the laws, the ownership of the land. You know how we have a lot of troubles with the law. Like if someone inherits a land, they cannot use it before like paying huge sums of money. This is why people tend to ignore their lands, because they cannot resolve their ownership issues. And this is something we need to look at. So there are other problems. It's not just like technology that definitely can help attract young people, but this is not everything. So It's just the first thing you can see, but it's not. It does not solve the whole problem.
Right. And I also wanted to ask, since you mentioned, the government not stepping in to help people in the farming sector, how do you feel about subsidies? It seems that what I've read, it seems to be like a controversial topic among economists when it comes to agriculture. I just seem to be reading a mixed bag of negative and positive effects. But countries, and I'm seeing countries like Asia, especially the Philippines, Indonesia, China, India, all contribute some of their GDP, and even the United States, just a fraction maybe of the GDP to the farming sector. How do you feel about subsidies?
Like I don't have I cannot say that subsidies are like bad or good. Because first we have different types of subsidies. So we cannot treat them as one homogeneous group and so on. And subsidies, like logically, they should be like there for a specific target or for a specific goal for a specific period in time. However, if it's there and it's continuous and it's creating dependency without a clear exit strategy, then they become a problem, especially when you are spending huge amounts and you're not getting something meaningful in return. So you can choose to subsidize farmers, but if the benefit of these subsidies, let's say, are limited, then you might need to reconsider the whole strategy. And you should ask, like, who is getting the subsidy? For example, like in the past years, under the CAP, which is basically the program, the huge program in Europe, like huge sums of the subsidies used to go to the big farmers. They did not benefit like the small farmers. So there are different layers to subsidies. So saying they're bad or good, it really depends. And there is also the ideological part that plays a role in the perception of subsidies. Like if you are coming from a very liberal perspective, then subsidies should be banned. Stop subsidies. Like the first thing you would hear is basically remove subsidies. This is usually what the IMF proposes in every developing countries facing problem. Just remove the subsidies. These are draining the budget, the government budget. Like in other countries where they have more of a socialist background, let's say, or maybe a communist background, they see agriculture as a social right, as a right, the right to food. So they would continue to subsidize it, even if it's not that profitable, and even if it's draining the budget, they would continue to do it as part of their bigger social strategy, let's say. So ideology plays a role in evaluating the subsidies, and there are different layers. Whether the subsidies is, if you are going to subsidize something or a production, now you are doing it to reach a certain goal. If you're not able to reach it, then you should reconsider. Or if you are reaching this goal but at a very high cost, you might need to rethink the way you're doing it. You might need to look at who's receiving the benefit out of these subsidies and who's excluded from these subsidies. I can give you an example, like in Lebanon. For the past 20 years, the government used to subsidize energy prices, fuel, used to subsidize electricity, bread, wheat, so many other things. Now, if you think of it, the kind of subsidies we use for 20 years, they're like regressive subsidies. They are regressive in nature. The richer people tend to benefit more than the poorer people from these subsidies, because it's flat. Like it's fixing the prices. For example, when it comes to the bread or the electricity or the fuel, it's fixing the prices for everyone. Now, the richer people are more likely to consume more and spend more, so they will benefit more from the subsidies than the poorer people, because the poorer people will not be able to spend much anyway. So you're fixing the price, or you're keeping the price, let's say, this is one example, you're keeping the prices low, artificially low, to make the product, let's say, affordable to people. However, those who benefit or who are going to benefit more are the richer people who are capable to buy more of this product. So this is why like economists and some policymaker in the country started to call for like more targeted subsidies. Let's say help, like instead of spending millions of dollars on subsidizing everything, or like subsidizing all these, just give a cash support to the vulnerable instead of like spending money on everyone. So there are so many layers to this topic. It's not easy to say, subsidies are good or bad. The context really is really important.
Wow. Souhad, I really respect what you do. I've tried to read economics books and game theory, and there's just so much to learn. And I'm so glad that you took the time to spend chatting with a old kitchen grunt like me, and I'm just trying to educate myself on things like these, and I really appreciate it. With all the effort that you've placed into educating others about, our rich heritage as human beings, farming and agriculturally, what keeps you most hopeful about Lebanon?
Wow. Well, I think the easiest way, to get rid of all this mess is to travel, just to leave the country. And for many, this was the best option, and I understand this. I understand other people's choices. To me, like I always had this feeling that I'm responsible to help other, because let's say, how to explain it. I don't know how to explain it, because it's a very subject thing, you know. I have the luxury, let's say, to remain in the country and have a decent life, and I can't stay in the country and say that, simply do my business and without caring about others. But whether you like it or not, we are surrounded with misery. So it's very hard to detach yourself from your surrounding. So since I do have this luxury, let's say, whether I'm able to access information more than other, or whether I'm able to access economic resources more than other. So since I have this luxury, so I feel like I'm responsible to help others. Now, I may not be able to have a huge impact or to change things at the macro level, but if I'm able to do an impact, let's say, even if at a small scale, I would choose to do it. And this is basically what I and other people are trying to do as well. There are many people in Lebanon, or young people, who came after the crisis just to help people in Lebanon. I think this is a very big thing, like they can stay like in other countries and have an amazing life out there, but they chose to come and support people, whether through knowledge or funding or training or any other matters. And I'm not sure, maybe you're not aware of that, but there is a group of young people that started to educate people at the beginning of the economic crisis in Lebanon. They started on Twitter a group to educate people about the crisis. And I think this was an important thing to do. Like, people have the right to know what's happening to them. And if you're able to help, then why not, It's not like I'm imposing things on others. If they need help and they are asking for help, then I'm willing to help if I'm able to help. And again, if I have the capacity, then why not? And I think there are other people who are doing that as well. And there are many people who are spending days and months in the ground, let's say, supporting poor people, supporting vulnerable groups, whether women or farmer or anything. They're spending hours and days supporting them. And I personally think this is amazing. I know for others it might not be important. I've actually heard people saying you're being foolish for wasting your time in the country. For me, this is essential, and I think I derive satisfaction by helping people, and I'm enjoying it, and I'm fine.
That's amazing. That really makes me happy to hear. It sounds like, you see people that haven't lost hope and are also fostering, I guess, resilience in themselves, and I guess the country's resilience is still alive.
It's not
And with
easy,
that,
It's not easy
yeah,
because
sure.
we have these moments where, I personally have these moments where, why am I staying here? Why am I doing this? Why do I keep trying? So I keep asking myself, why wasting so much time and energy doing this? Then, when I do something and enjoy, or feel like I helped someone, I stopped questioning things. It's not easy, especially with the instability that we're experiencing. Like things can change by day in Lebanon. Like we might have access to internet today, we might not have access tomorrow. It's that uncertain, and it's exhausting to many people. But if there is a chance that we can improve things, then we should try at least.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. One thing I like to ask a lot about in this podcast, especially it came born from my feeling during the pandemic when it first happened, was I had just this feeling of vulnerability and that I don't have 100% food security. Nobody really does, right? Especially when the systems are shocked in the way that it was. What I'd like to help ask, especially in myself and in others, is like, what does resilience mean to you, and how do you think this is developed in people?
I don't like this word because it's been abused in media.
Sure.
It's been abused in a way that it became so meaningless. Like when people use it, they just, resilience. This is a nice word to say, and it's easy to preach and so on, but it's not easy to reach actually. How I perceive resilience is basically being able to create local strength and local capacity to absorb shocks or to be prepared for coming shocks. So one of the problems with the pandemic is that we were not prepared for it. It came at a time where we thought things are going fine, and we were not that prepared for it. And it was something new to deal with. And we started learning from it. So like some communities were able, or some countries were able to deal with it better than others due to the difference in resources and capacity and experiences and so on. So what I think we should do, it's not like I'm calling for to be isolated or so, but I think everything starts at the local level. If you want your society to be more resilient, you have to invest in your local society or local communities, invest in their capacity, in their resources, in their ability to create networks and partnerships that are able to support them in bad times. This is how you improve resilience. It's not I don't see it as something that can be seen at mainly, let's say, a big level or national level. I see it as a local thing. Now, some people might not agree with me, and I understand, because there are different perspectives for the concept, or different approaches to this concept. But the way I see it is through localization. At least in the country, this is what's happening. It's happening automatically. It was not planned, but somehow, if you think, because we were like dealing with a huge uncertainty, and we didn't have solutions, and we didn't have much resources to deal with whatever is happening, whether it's the pandemic or the economic crisis. People went back to their, let's say, community, to the very local level, to start something or to do something. And I think this is the natural approach of doing things.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. I think the same thing too, is that change on a grassroots level.
Yes.
But also that we can't do it alone, and that you need to have a community of people around you. And I'm very glad you made that point.
I'm not saying that the government does not have a role. It does have a role, of course, but strengthening, let's say, at least when it comes to food systems, strengthening the local supply chains is extremely helpful to stabilize food supply, to sustain, let's say, food production activities, to make sure that everything remains at an acceptable level. This is very important. And
I love that.
when it comes to food security, I have to be real. It cannot be achieved without government support. So because there are certain parts of food security that are only government matters. But what I'm trying to say, basically, is we cannot ignore the importance of the localization of supply chain. It's very important.
We've been talking about food the whole time, but we haven't really talked about actual food. What's a typical holiday feast for you and your family, or what is your ideal? Let's just say on a really big holiday, what do you like to see?
You might be surprised, though I work in the food sector and the agriculture sector, but I'm not that into food.
Okay.
So I prefer basic food stuff, let's say fruits, basic meals. I don't like mixing ingredients and so on. I can try, but at the personal level, I prefer simple food.
Right.
We have tabbouleh in Lebanon, and this is one of our favorite salads.
Uh-huh.
This is one of the traditional, basically our traditional food, and I really like it. I'm not a fan of meats, so I tend to eat more vegetables and fruits and salads. Though I eat meat,
Right.
but I think this is more sustainable as well.
Right.
I'm not sure if what I'm researching is influencing my choices. Now I'm thinking of it, and it might be the case. I don't know.
Right. No, I mean, you and I both. I've grew up, I was professionally cooking so much fancy foods and greasy, foods that people just stuff their faces with. But in the end, I love to eat simply as well. Chickpeas, rice.
Yeah, exactly.
Tabbouleh is one of my favorites too. Hummus is a staple in this house too. So,
Our
thanks for
diet
sharing that.
actually is very healthy. The Mediterranean diet is very diversified and very healthy. And it did not, originally, it did not have complicated meals,
Right. Yeah. That's very opposite of what the Filipino diet is, which is a lot of fatty pork, a lot of just meat, fried eggs, and rice. Very bad stuff. There were so many things that I wanted to ask you about, but I think, we covered a lot about food security and the things that we initially got together to talk about for. And, for that, I'm really grateful for your time and your patience in answering all the questions that I've had for you. In the meantime, I have this book, Basic Economics, that I've picked up along with do you recommend any other books as far as your expertise, or I know you write yourself, and I'm definitely going to link those in the website that I have. Any other books that you recommend?
It really depends on what you're trying to learn.
Food. Let's just stick with food for now.
For food, okay.
Food security.
Food security. There is a book, I don't recall the author now, but there is a book called Food Policy, and it's a big book, but it's very comprehensive, and it tackles all aspects of food security and global food system and how it's interconnected and how can food policies affect these different agents in this system. I can send you the name of the author. I don't recall it now, but I think it's it's basic in the sense, it doesn't have very complicated terms and very technical terms, but at the same time, it's good enough to explain all the important topics in food systems and food security, and it was very useful to me. This is the first thing that comes to my mind. I'd like to perhaps, if you have time, it might be a bit technical. Amartya Sen book, Famine and Poverty, or Poverty and Famine. Oh my God, I can't recall the titles for some reason. This is a good book as well, because it tackles one of the topics that we mentioned, how in times of, let's say, food production was actually good enough, we had people starving. So it discusses different types of poverties, and how we can define poverty in a way to be able to deal with it in a better way, and how to understand, or how we understand how can food policy basically affect these groups or these kinds of poverty. This is an interesting book as well. It might be a bit technical, unlike the first one, but it's interesting. These are the first two books that come to my mind, but there are so many others actually.
Any personal favorites of yours?
Personal favorite. Well, my personal favorite books are not really into food and
That's
food
fine.
and economics. I like to read psychology and sociology and stuff like that. And I read a lot of philosophy. So these are basically the favorite fields. But if I need to recall like one book now, I would say The Art of Loving for Eric Fromm. This is a mix of sociology, psychology, but I like the whole approach. I like his books anyway, but no, this is one of my favorite. And another book for Eric Fromm is called To Have or To Be. These are really interesting books. The thing is, this is something like an idea that I had since university. I don't see disciplines as like different or separate components. They are connected in a way. So when I read, for example, To Have or To Be or The Art of Loving, it tackles like things related to consumption, for example, how we approach relationship, how we approach consumption and other topics. So it's a sociology or psychology book, but it's somehow connected to, let's say, economics and other fields. Same thing for philosophy. So when you read, let's say, a philosophy book, you can still use it in your field, whether in teaching or when designing, let's say, intervention. And this is something I experienced at the very personal level. Like I took ethics, an online ethics course, and it changed my whole perspective in like the programs I designed. So I started to look at things in a different way and to approach intervention in a different way. So I started to question the ethical part of the intervention, whether am I imposing things on people or it's fine. So I before that, it was not an issue to me, you know. So I don't see disciplines as separate things. So even if I'm not reading economics, I'm reading something, I might be able to use it in economics or let's say in food and agriculture and so on. So this is why my favorite books are not economics or books related to food. They're mostly in philosophy and
Right. I love that you mentioned
sociology.
that, because that's also my approach to learning. I'm trying to take what I know and apply it to other fields. And I know you wrote about that too. I read an article that you wrote when applying to decide what majors to choose for college students. Is that, what skills will you develop beyond the box of that major that you could transfer to other fields? Would you call that like a meta knowledge that can be applied? What's the exact term for that, do you think? I'm struggling to find the word for it. Apply. Yeah. What do you call it?
I really don't know what to call it.
Uh-huh.
I just simply think that in essence, like all types of knowledge are interconnected, as simple as that. If you go back to the like ancient philosophy, let's say the Greek times, like the philosopher used to discuss matters related to economics, related to justice, let's say sociology, related to mathematics and other stuff. So it did not require the over specialization that is required from us now. And I think this over specialization is, instead of like, it's killing the intuition in certain disciplines, specifically in economics, for example. Like they're trying to go into like they're trying to make economics or to turn economics into a science, and
Mm-hmm,
this
mm-hmm.
requires a lot of over specialization and the use of mathematics and so on, in a way that is killing the intuition behind it. And I think this is happening in other disciplines as well, not just economics. So the over specialization, it makes you basically know more about a tiny piece of the discipline, but it's killing your intuition. It's basically is not allowing you to see the big picture, or how different factors or different elements from other disciplines might interact with this piece of information, or that you're trying to explore or research or understand.
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
so I think it's the fact that we're overemphasizing specialization. Or this is basically the issue. But you know, the skills are basically part of this link between these different disciplines. So you might see certain skills that can be transferred from one discipline to another, and you can feel like there are certain topics that are tackled like in all disciplines, like ethics, for example. You can have like a course in bioethics. You can have a course in business ethics. So, you know, there are parts that are basically common to every discipline, and somehow they build on each other in a very interesting way.
Mm-hmm.
I feel sorry for people who over specialize, because I think they are missing a very enjoyable part of learning, and something that is very interesting in other from other disciplines. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just curious, what do you feel that are I guess, if you could narrow it down to 3 to 5 skills necessary to succeed in the 21st century, what would you say that would be?
Adaptability. This is one. If we're talking about soft skills, right? It's not technical,
Not
or what?
technical, yeah, soft skills. Yeah, sure.
I
Yeah.
think adaptability is one of the main things or skills. Problem solving.
Mm-hmm.
This is another key skill. Communication,
Mm.
because sometimes you might be a genius. If you're not able to communicate your ideas well, then you're useless. Or
Right.
whatever genius idea you might have will become useless. So communication is definitely needed in like all fields, actually. And other than adaptability, communication, problem solving, what else? I'm trying to think. Stress management.
Wow. Stress management.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes.
Uh,
It's because this is something you're gonna deal with on a daily basis, and you need to know how to deal with, basically.
wow. Wow. I wasn't expecting. Okay. Um, what's your best form of stress management, or how do you deal with stress?
Uh, I might not be the best person to answer that. I have a very good level of stress in my life. However,
Right.
I think like there are certain ways to play around it or to deal with it. Like meditation is very useful. Is definitely very useful. And I think if you can plan your work in a way that reduces the stress level, or let's say takes into consideration potential risks ahead of time, this might reduce the level of stress. Yani somehow you try to incorporate in your planning what are the potential things that might go wrong, so you'll be prepared or more prepared to deal with something with whatever goes wrong, because you somehow thought of it before, so your brain is okay with it, is not surprised. It's not like, part of the stress that we experience is that we're experiencing because something unexpected happens. And part of it might be due to the environment we're operating and the people that we are dealing with and so on. Like, and it can be the macro context, let's say
Right.
the what's happening in the country or at the global level or etc. Like some part of this stress is basically manageable and it can be reduced.
Right.
So if you focus on the part that you can actually deal with and reduce, this is the first step. And the second step is basically to use whatever tools you can have, like meditation, some music, basically can help, like certain types of music. I've been using lately like certain frequencies and 5 to 8 hertz, let's say, and so on. I play them as a background music while working, and somehow they seem effective. Meditation, this is one way. Planning, Anna, for me personally, I think planning can help reduce stress.
Oh,
I
planning.
personally tend to plan, and I consider, like, whenever I have something coming, like something big, a deadline or project or so on, if I plan it well, let's say I consider different possible scenarios, this will help me reduce the stress as I start implementing the project or do whatever I am supposed to do.
Wow. Wow. Lastly, one last question, I promise. I can ask you questions for hours. Um, Technical skills necessary.
Now everything is going towards the digital transformation. So
Yeah.
coding, cloud computing, some marketing skills, specifically digital marketing skills, are definitely useful because they have like applications in almost every possible field. So these are the three skills I think they're very important. Data analysis.
Analysis, you say?
Data analysis,
Data
yes.
analysis. Yes, 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 yes. Okay. Excellent. Excellent stuff. I've learned so much in this conversation, especially in reference to food security. Suhad, any final thoughts, parting words?
I think I don't know if like people are concerned about food security, like people in other countries are concerned about food security or not. But I think like each one of us should be aware of the basics, and we should be more responsible, whether in our consumption of food or in our production if we are producing food. So we should be more responsible, and we should be aware that there are millions of people that are hungry and they're basically going to bed without eating. We might not be able to solve their issues, but at least we should act in a responsible way to respect our resources, to understand that the food that we are consuming may not be always available as we think, and we should not take it for granted for different reasons, and to understand that wasting food and is a critical issue, because when you're wasting food, you're draining resources. You're wasting the effort of hundreds of people who might be involved in the production of this food. And basically, we're depleting our resources, our natural resources. We are reaching points like where climate change is becoming a huge issue. We might not at the individual level change much, but we can start with the basics and be aware of our consumption pattern and do it in a responsible way. So basically, this is more of a call for action or call for awareness, let's say. I feel like I should say that. And apart from that, thank you for hosting me. I didn't know how you found me on Twitter, but thank you for the opportunity.
No,
it was
definitely.
it
Thank
was
you so
enjoyable.
much. I'm very grateful for this time. I found you on Twitter because as a newbie to Twitter and to this whole podcasting thing, I've only been doing it for less than a year now. I was just like, what can Twitter offer? I have nothing to say. So I was like, okay, I'm interested in food. Or what about food? Food security is a big concern of mine personally. And now that I'm thinking of it in a global scale, and a lot of things have happened since I reached out to you. Wow, what a time to be speaking with you and to talk about awareness. So that's how I found you. Was I follow people in, I guess, food agriculture, and food security, and then I guess you were the first person that popped up. And it's interesting that not that many people here domestically, I've found, are talking about this kind of thing. Are you finding this
Not
something that's,
really.
yeah,
Unfortunately, food security, usually it's a topic that is discussed, let's say, by policymakers or like international organizations, and it's discussed at a very high level.
right,
So people are not aware of its actual meaning, and we don't really find people talking about it much. And we don't find people talking about it in a way that is accessible to other people. Like
right,
sometimes there are discussions that are too technical that most people don't understand and lose interest in.
mm-hmm.
So I think what I was trying to do on my Twitter account and my LinkedIn account is basically from time to time discuss certain food security matters, and avoiding the jargons and avoiding the complicated terms and the technical terms, just to say to people that this is a topic that you need to be following and you need to be aware of, and this is something that affects our daily life, and we are all concerned, not just in developing countries, even in developed countries. Like I can give you an example. In the States, they suffer from obesity, basically
Yes,
overnutrition. This is
yeah.
also a food security matter. This
Mm-hmm.
is a food
Mm-hmm.
security matter. It's like, if you remember the third component, which is utilization, which is the nutritional part. So when you have your people over consuming and consuming the wrong kind of food, then this is a food security matter. So
Mm-hmm.
this is also an issue. So people need to understand that this is a topic that affects their daily life, and they should be aware of it, and they should read more about it, and they should seek knowledge, because this will affect their life, and this will might alter their consumption patterns.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So basically, yeah, that's how I found you on Twitter, and I'm glad I did, because now that we're talking about this, I'm just hoping that this is not going to be the last time we get to do this, especially on this topic. There's so much to talk about I mean, and you
Yeah,
just
it's a very big topic.
raised such a big issue there is obesity, and that's a whole nother rabbit hole that we could go down. And I just think it's more about having conversations like this and raising awareness. Obesity, I can go down the list. I have so many notes that I've never even overfishing, dust clouds, the soil being depleted of nutrients and minerals.
And
There's so many things.
I think
Yeah.
it all boils down to responsible consumption.
Right. I mean, how do you tell that to people here in the United States that can barely find one thing to agree on other than, I don't know, BTS? You know what I mean? So, yeah, I hope we could do this again, Souhad. Thank you so much for doing this. And, it's I'm just very grateful that you'd take the time to speak with me. I have no expertise in this field. I'm just very curious,
This is
and
how everything starts, basically, with
right.
curiosity.
Yeah. I just want to help raise awareness as well. So thank you very much. I hope we could do this again. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
I'm gonna stop. Thank you all for listening. Please reach out to Souhad on Twitter at Souhad, SOUHAD _1616. That's Souhad _16 at Twitter. Check out the show notes. You'll find all her contact information and links to articles she's written on our website, thequakecityportal.com. There are also links to some of the videos I saw in preparation for this episode, which are fascinating. Hopefully they get your gears turning, and I'll link those on the show notes as well. Please reach out if you have any suggestions, critiques, or just want to share your thoughts on this topic and on other topics that you've heard on this podcast. Comment to us on social media at Quake City Portal on Twitter, at the Quake City Portal on Instagram, and those links are on the website as well. The music on the show is performed by Catherine DeLafcoran. Thank you to her. Thank you to Souhad. Thank you to all the farmers, fishermen, women, chefs, food workers, fishermen and women, chefs, food workers, delivery drivers, bakers, and all the people that contribute to this beautiful machine that nourishes us. Thank you to the land that feeds us. Thank you to the listener, to you, for listening, for your listening ears. And thank you for supporting the show. And you can show support for the show by subscribing to us on your streaming platforms, whether it's Apple Podcasts or Google or YouTube, whatever it is. Please subscribe and let us know on social media. I guess that's enough from me. Thanks everybody for listening. More to come in the future. Bye-bye.